He might not make it, my brother told our dad. We need to think about the farm. My name's Joseph. I'm 32, and I'd been in a coma for 3 weeks after my truck rolled on Highway 84 outside Boise, Idaho. What nobody knew was that I could hear everything. Every damn word. My brother informed our father that I might not survive, and we needed to consider the future of the farm. I am Joseph, a 32-year-old who had been in a 3-week coma following a truck accident on Highway 84 near Boise, Idaho. Unknown to everyone, I could hear every single thing they said. I'd grown up on that farm, 100 acres of potato fields and wheat that our grandfather bought in 1952. Dad always said it would be mine someday, since I was the one who stayed. It's the one who worked the land, the one who never left for college or chased dreams in the city. My brother Tyler had moved to Seattle 12 years ago, became some kind of marketing executive, visited maybe twice a year. But there he was standing next to my hospital bed talking to Dad about contingency plans and legal documents. His voice had that careful tone he used when he wanted something professional, smooth. I was raised on that 200-acre farm, with its potato and wheat fields, which our grandfather acquired in 1952. My father always promised the farm would be mine, because I was the one who chose to stay and work the land, unlike others who left for college or to pursue city careers. My brother Tyler had relocated to Seattle 12 years ago to become a marketing executive and only came home a couple of times a year. Yet he was now by my hospital bed, discussing backup plans and legal paperwork with my dad. He spoke with a measured, slick tone, the same one he used in professional situations. Joseph wouldn't want the farm to just sit there, Tyler said. You know how he feels about the land. If something happens, we need to make sure it's protected. Dad's voice shook. I can't think about this right now. I know it's hard, but the lawyer said we need to act fast if we want to avoid probate issues. It's just temporarily until we know more. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell them I was right there listening to every word they said, but my body wouldn't move. The machines kept beeping, and Tyler kept talking about temporary measures and protecting assets. I could take care of everything, he said. It's just until Joseph gets better. You know, I understand business better than anyone. Tyler claimed that I wouldn't want the farm to remain idle, stating, his connection to the land. If something were to happen, we must ensure it's safeguarded. My dad's voice trembled as he replied, I can't deal with this right now, Tyler insisted. I know it's difficult, but the lawyer advised that we act quickly to avoid problems with probate. It would only be a temporary solution until we have more information. I desperately wanted to yell and let them know I was there, hearing every word, but I was unable to move. The medical equipment continued to beep as Tyler went on about interim solutions and asset preservation. He added, I can manage everything until Joseph recovers. I have a better understanding of business than anyone. The nurses came and went. Tyler left around 9 p.m., promising to come back the next day with paperwork. Dad stayed until midnight, holding my hand and whispering apologies I didn't understand. When I finally fell back into the darkness, I kept hearing Tyler's voice. The way he said, if something happens, like it was already decided. The way he talked about the farm like it was just another business deal. I'd trusted him my whole life. We'd fought as kids, sure, but I thought blood meant something. I thought 13 years of me working that land while he played corporate games meant something. But lying there in that hospital bed, machines breathing, for me, I started to understand. Nurses came and went. Tyler left around 9 p.m., pledging to return with the documents the following day. My dad remained until midnight, holding my hand and murmuring incomprehensible apologies. As I drifted back into unconsciousness, Tyler's voice echoed in my mind. The phrase, if something happens, sounded as if the outcome was already determined. He discussed the farm as if it were a mere business transaction. I had trusted him my entire life. We had our childhood arguments, but I believed our family connection meant something. I believed my 13 years of laboring on the land while he pursued. His corporate career mattered. But as I lay in that hospital bed, relying on machines to breathe for me, I began to grasp the truth. Tyler hadn't come home to help. He'd come home to collect. The next morning, I heard him talking to someone on his phone outside my room. Yeah, "It looks pretty bad," he said. "Doctors aren't giving us much hope." That was when I knew for certain. My own brother was already planning my funeral. I'd been working Dad's farm since I was 16. Started driving the tractor before I could legally drive a car. Every morning at 5 a.m., every season, every year. While Tyler was in high school talking about college applications and internships, I was learning irrigation systems and crop rotation. Dad never pushed me into it. I chose it. Loved the smell of turned earth in spring, the satisfaction of a good harvest. The way the sunrise looked different over our fields than anywhere else. Tyler used to call it playing in the dirt. But I knew it was more than that. It was legacy. Tyler didn't return home to offer support. He returned to claim his share. Ow. Following morning, I overheard him on the phone just outside my room. "Things are looking pretty grim," he said. "The doctors aren't optimistic." It was in that moment that I realized my own brother was already preparing for my death. I had been working on my father's farm since I was 16, operating a tractor before I was even old enough to drive a car. I was there every morning at 5 a.m., through every season, year after year. Tyler was focused on high school, college applications, and internships. I was learning about irrigation and crop rotation. My dad never pressured me. It was my own choice. I adored the scent of freshly tilled soil in the spring, the satisfaction of a successful harvest, and the unique way the sun rose over our fields. Tyler used to mock my work, calling it playing in the dirt, but I knew it was so much more. It was a legacy. Our grandfather had built something real. Dad had maintained it, improved it, turned those 200 acres into one of the most productive small farms in the valley. And I'd planned to keep it going, maybe even expand it someday. Tyler left for the University of Washington right after graduation. Business degree, then a marketing job with some tech company. He'd call home. Maybe once a month, send Christmas cards with pictures of his apartment overlooking Puget Sound. He had a good life up there. Girlfriend named Jessica, expensive car, downtown condo. He'd visit for Dad's birthday and Thanksgiving, sometimes Easter. If work wasn't too busy, it's always polite, always asking about the farm, but never staying long enough to actually help with anything. Never getting his hands dirty, our grandfather established something substantial. My father preserved and enhanced it, transforming our 200 acres into one of the most successful small farms in the valley. I had intended to carry on that tradition, and perhaps even expand the farm one day. Right after high school, Tyler went to the University of Washington, earned a business degree, and then took a marketing job with a tech company. He would call home about once a month and send Christmas cards featuring photos of his apartment with a view of Puget Sound. He had a nice life in Seattle, a girlfriend named Jessica, a fancy car, and a condo downtown. He would come home for my dad's birthday and Thanksgiving, and occasionally for Easter, if his work schedule allowed. He was always courteous and always asked about the farm. But he never stayed long enough to help with any work or get his hands dirty. I didn't resent it. Not really, we were different people. He liked cities and meetings and whatever it was. Marketing executives did all day. I liked open sky and honest work and knowing exactly where my food came from. But there had been signs, little things that bothered me more than they should have. I didn't genuinely resent his life. We simply had different personalities. He was drawn to urban life, meetings, and whatever tasks marketing executives performed. I preferred the wide open sky, honest labor, and knowing the exact source of my food. However, there were subtle warning signs, minor details that troubled me more than they should have. Last Christmas, Tyler had asked a lot of questions about the farm's finances. How much we made per acre, what our equipment was worth, whether Dad had updated his will recently. He called it just curious and wanting to understand the family business better. Then in March, he'd suggested Dad should think about retiring. "You're 73, he'd said. You've earned some rest." When Dad said he wasn't ready, Tyler had pushed a little. What if something happened to you? What if Joseph couldn't handle everything alone? I'd laughed it off at the time, told Dad that Tyler was just being practical. He's thinking like a businessman. Last Christmas, Tyler was very inquisitive about the farm's finances, asking about our earnings per acre, the value of our equipment, and if our dad had recently updated his will. He explained it away as simple curiosity and a desire to better understand the family business. Then in March, he suggested that my dad should retire. "You're 73, he said. You deserve a break." My dad replied that he wasn't ready. Tyler pressed the issue. "What if something happened to you? What if Joseph couldn't manage everything on his own?" At the time, I brushed it off, telling my dad that Tyler was just being pragmatic and thinking like a businessman. But now, lying in this hospital bed, those conversations felt different. The accident had happened on a Tuesday. I'd been driving back from the grain elevator when a tire blew and sent my truck into a rolling mess of metal and broken glass. The doctors told Dad I was lucky to be alive now. From my hospital bed, those conversations took on a new meaning. The accident occurred on a Tuesday. A blown tire caused my truck to flip over while I was driving home from the grain elevator, leaving a tangled wreck of metal and shattered glass. The doctors told my dad I was fortunate to have survived. Tyler had been on a plane from Seattle by Wednesday morning, but he hadn't come to pray for my recovery. He'd come to manage the situation. On the fourth day, I heard everything change. Tyler brought a lawyer to Dad's house. I knew because Dad came to the hospital afterward and sat by my bed for 2 hours, just holding my hand and crying. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. "I'm so sorry, son. I don't know what else to do." Tyler flew in from Seattle by Wednesday morning, not to hope for my recovery, but to take control of the situation. Everything changed on the fourth day. Tyler brought a lawyer to our dad's house. I was aware of this because my dad came to the hospital afterward and sat by my bed for 2 hours, crying and holding my hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was shattered. "So sorry, son. I don't know what else to do." The next morning, Tyler was back with documents. Set them on the bedside table like I wasn't even there. The lawyer explained everything, he told Dad. "This way, if Joseph doesn't make it, the farm stays in the family. No probate, no taxes. No government getting involved. And if he does recover, we can always transfer everything back." Dad's signature sounded like scratching paper. 3 times. "You did the right thing," Tyler said, what I denote. The following morning, Tyler returned with a stack of papers. He placed them on the bedside table as if I weren't there. The lawyer outlined the plan to my dad. This arrangement would ensure the farm remains in the family if I don't survive, avoiding probate, taxes, or government interference. He added that if I did recover, they could always transfer the property back. I heard the sound of my dad's signature 3 times, like paper being scratched. "You've done the right thing," Tyler assured him. "Joseph would approve." That's when I knew I'd lost everything. Not just the farm, but the life I'd built, the future I'd planned, the trust I'd given to the only family I had left. But something else happened in that moment. Something Tyler couldn't have expected. Anger didn't come hot and wild like I thought it would. It came cold and clear. I stopped trying to move, stopped fighting the machine, stopped hoping someone would notice I was awake. Instead, I started listening. Really listening. It was then that I realized I had lost everything. Not just the farm, but the life I had created, the future I had planned, and the trust I had placed in my only remaining family. However, in that instant, something unexpected happened, something Tyler couldn't have predicted. Instead of a fiery, uncontrollable rage, I felt a calm and clear anger. I stopped trying to move, stopped struggling against the machine, and stopped hoping someone would realize I was conscious. Instead, I began to listen. I mean, truly listen. Tyler stayed in town for another week. Every day, he'd visit the hospital for exactly 30 minutes, usually, when nurses were around to see him being the devoted brother. Then, he'd spend the rest of his time at the farm, walking the property with his phone, taking pictures, making calls. I heard him talking to Jessica one evening. "It's actually pretty valuable," he said. "Prime agricultural land plus the house and all the equipment. We're talking at least $2 million, maybe more if we subdivide and sell to developers." Tyler stayed in town for an additional week. Each day, he would visit the hospital for precisely 30 minutes. Usually when nurses were present, so they could witness him acting like a concerned brother. He'd then spend the rest of his time on the farm, taking pictures and making calls, while walking the property with his phone. I overheard him speaking to Jessica one night. "It's actually quite valuable, prime agricultural land, the house and all the equipment." We're looking at least $2 million, and possibly more if we divide the land and sell it to developers. He wasn't planning to keep the farm, he was planning to cash it out. The irony was perfect. Tyler thought he was so smart playing the grieving brother, while positioning himself to inherit everything. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He assumed I couldn't hear him. He had no intention of keeping the farm. He planned to sell it for a profit. The irony was complete. Tyler believed he was being clever, acting the part of a mourning brother, while maneuvering to inherit everything. However, he made one critical error. He assumed I was unable to hear him. When the doctors finally reduced my sedation enough for me to open my eyes, Tyler was there with his fake tears and practiced grief. "Thank God," he said, squeezing my hand. "We were so worried." I looked up at him and smiled weakly. "Thanks for everything." I had no idea that I'd heard every conversation, every phone call, every plan he'd made to steal my life. But I had. Heard and I remembered. And now it was time to plan my own moves. When the doctors reduced my sedation to the point where I could open my eyes, Tyler was there, displaying his fake tears and rehearsed sadness. "Thank God," he said, holding my hand tightly. "We were so worried." I looked at him and gave a faint smile. "Thanks for everything." He was completely unaware that I had overheard every conversation, every phone call, and every plan he had made to take my life, but I had heard, and I had memorized it all. Now, it was time for me to make my own moves. 2 weeks after I woke up, I was home, weak as a newborn colt, but alive and supposedly grateful. Tyler had extended his stay to help with the transition, which meant sitting in Dad's kitchen making phone calls while I relearned how to walk without falling over. I played the part perfectly. Grateful brother, confused about legal details, focused on recovery. 2 weeks after I regained consciousness, I returned home. Although I was as weak as a newborn colt, I was alive and by all appearances, thankful. Tyler had extended his visit to help me with the transition, which in practice meant he sat in my dad's kitchen making phone calls while I struggled to walk again without falling. I played my role flawlessly, the grateful brother bewildered by the legal matters and focused on getting better. When Tyler mentioned that Dad had made some temporary arrangements for the farm's management, I nodded like it made perfect sense. "Just until you're back on your feet," Tyler said. "Dad was worried about the financial pressure." That was smart, I told him. I wouldn't want Dad stressed about that stuff. But I was gathering information, every conversation, every document. Tyler left on the kitchen table, every phone call I could overhear from my bedroom. I learned that the farm was now officially in Tyler's name, not temporarily, permanently. I also learned that he'd already contacted 3 different real estate developers. When Tyler told me that our dad had made some temporary arrangements to manage the farm, I acted as if it was completely logical. "It's just until you're back on your feet," Tyler said. Dad was concerned about the financial strain. "That was a good idea," I replied. I wouldn't want Dad to be stressed about any of that. But I was secretly gathering information, paying attention to every conversation, every document Tyler left on the kitchen table, and every phone call I could overhear from my bedroom. I discovered that the farm had been legally transferred to Tyler permanently, not temporarily. I also found out that he had already reached out to 3 different real estate developers. My first move was simple. I called our family lawyer, Pete Morrison, and asked him to come by the house. Tyler was in town getting supplies and Dad was napping. "Pete," I said when he arrived, "I need to understand what happened while I was in the hospital." Pete looked uncomfortable. "Your brother said you knew about the arrangements." "I know Dad transferred the farm to Tyler. I just want to understand the legal details." Pete pulled out a file. "It's a standard deed transfer. Tyler convinced your father that if you didn't survive, the farm would be tied up in probate for years. He said it was temporary just for protection." "But the documents don't say temporary, do they?" Pete shook his head. "No, they don't. It's a complete transfer of ownership. Can it be reversed?" "Only if Tyler agrees to transfer it back, or if you can prove fraud or undue influence, which would be very difficult." I thanked Pete and asked him not to mention the visit to Tyler. "Or Dad," he agreed. but I could see the worry in his eyes. My first action was straightforward. I contacted our family lawyer, Pete Morrison, and asked him to come to the house while Tyler was out getting supplies and my dad was napping. When he arrived, I told him, "Pete, I need to know exactly what happened while I was in the hospital." Pete seemed uneasy. "Your brother said you were aware of the arrangements," I clarified. "I know my dad transferred the farm to Tyler. I just need to understand the legal specifics." Pete retrieved a file. "It's a standard deed transfer. Tyler persuaded your father that the farm would be stuck in probate for years if he didn't make it. He told him it was only temporary for protection. But the papers don't state that it's temporary, do they?" Pete shook his head. "No, they don't. It's a full transfer of ownership. Can it be undone?" "Only if Tyler agrees to transfer it back, or if you can prove fraud or undue influence, which would be very difficult." I thanked Pete and asked him to keep our meeting a secret from Tyler and my dad. Agreed, but I could see his concern. That evening, I made my mistake. I confronted Tyler directly. "I talked to Pete Morrison today," I said during dinner. Tyler's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Oh? About what? About the farm transfer? About how it's not actually temporary?" The room went quiet. Dad looked between us, confused. Tyler set down his fork and looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. "Joseph, you're still recovering. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking fine." "You lied to Dad. You told him the transfer was temporary, but you made it permanent. It protected our family's assets during a crisis. You should be thanking me." Dad's voice was small. "Tyler, you said we could change it back. We can if that's what Joseph really wants, but he needs to understand the tax implications, the legal complexities. Maybe we should discuss this when he's fully recovered." That night, I made a crucial error by confronting Tyler directly. "I spoke with Pete Morrison today," I announced during dinner. Tyler froze, his fork midway to his mouth. "Oh, about what?" "About the farm transfer. About how it's not actually temporary." The silence was deafening as my dad looked back and forth between us, bewildered. Tyler put down his fork and gave me a look I had never seen before, a cold and calculating stare. "Joseph, you're still recuperating. You're not thinking straight." I insisted, "I'm thinking perfectly fine. You lied to Dad. You told him the transfer was temporary, but you made it permanent. I was safeguarding our family's assets during a crisis. You should be grateful," he shot back. My dad's voice was quiet. "Tyler, you promised we could reverse it. We can if that's what Joseph truly desires, but he needs to comprehend the tax consequences and legal complications. Perhaps we should have this conversation when he's completely recovered." That's when Tyler played his trump card. "Besides," he said, looking directly at me, "I've already invested considerable time and money into managing the farm's affairs, legal fees, consultations, planning. If Joseph wants the farm back, he'll need to reimburse those expenses." "How much?" I asked. $60,000 so far." I stared at him. $60,000 I didn't have for work I'd never asked him to do. To buy back land that should have been mine in the first place. "Of course, if Joseph can't manage that expense right now, the current arrangement works fine," Tyler continued. "I don't mind carrying the financial burden." Dad looked lost. "Boys, I don't understand what's happening." "Nothing's happening, Dad," Tyler said gently. "Joseph's just confused. The medications can affect thinking for weeks after a coma." I realized then that Tyler had prepared for this moment. He'd created a narrative where I was the unstable one, the confused patient, questioning reasonable family decisions. Any move I made against him would look like mental instability or ingratitude. That was the moment Tyler played his ace. "Furthermore," he said, looking directly at me, "I've already put a significant amount of time and money into managing the farm's affairs, including legal fees, consultations, and planning. If Joseph wants the farm back, he'll have to pay me back for those." "Costs how much?" I asked. $60,000 to date?" I was stunned. I had no way of paying $60,000 for a job I never requested, just to reclaim land that was rightfully mine. Naturally, if Joseph is unable to handle that expense right now, the current arrangement is perfectly acceptable," Tyler went on. "I don't. Mine taking on the financial responsibility. My dad looked bewildered. Boys, I don't understand what's going on. Nothing's wrong, Dad, Tyler said softly. Joseph is just confused. The medications can affect a person's thoughts for weeks after a coma. It was then that I understood Tyler had anticipated this exact scenario. He had constructed a story where I was the erratic one, a bewildered patient, questioning rationale, family choices. Any action I took against him would be perceived as mental instability or a lack of gratitude. I'd shown my hand too early. Tyler had expertly turned it against me. You're right, I said finally. I'm sorry. I'm still not thinking straight. Tyler smiled. No worries, brother. We're family. We'll figure it out together. But I saw the victory in his eyes. He thought he'd won. I had revealed my intentions too soon, and Tyler had skillfully used it against me. You're right, I said finally. My apologies. I'm still not thinking clearly. Tyler smiled. No problem, brother. We're a family. We'll sort this out together. But I could see the triumph in his eyes. He believed he had won. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Tyler's confidence, his prepared answers, the way he'd turned my questions into evidence of my instability. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. I got up at 3 a.m. and walked to the kitchen. Tyler's laptop was on the table, closed but not locked. I opened it quietly. His email history told the whole story. The first message was dated 2 days after my accident. Tyler writing to a land development company in Boise. I may have an opportunity for agricultural land acquisition in the next few months. Prime location for residential development. I was unable to sleep that night. I kept thinking about Tyler's self-assurance, his rehearsed responses, and how he had used my questions as proof of my mental instability. This wasn't a sudden action. It was a deliberate plan. I got up at 3 a.m. and went to the kitchen. Tyler's laptop was on the table, closed but not locked. I opened it quietly. His email history revealed everything. The first email, sent just 2 days after my accident, was from Tyler to a land development company in Boise. I might have an opportunity to acquire some agricultural land in the coming months, he wrote. It's a prime spot for residential development. Another message 3 days later to a different company. Family farm may become available. 200 acres. Zoned agricultural, but excellent potential for subdivision. But the worst one was to Jessica, sent the day before he'd brought the lawyer to Dad's house. Everything's falling into place perfectly. Joseph's not going to make it. And even if he does, the brain damage will probably make him incompetent. Dad's completely overwhelmed and trusting me to handle everything. I should have the deed transferred by the end of the week. 3 days later, he sent another email to a different company. My family's farm might be for sale. It's 200 acres. Zoned for agriculture, but it has great potential for a subdivision. But the most disturbing email was the one he sent to Jessica the day before he brought the lawyer to my dad's house. Everything is working out perfectly. Joseph won't make it. And even if he does, the brain damage will likely make him incapable. Dad is completely overwhelmed and trusts me to handle everything. I expect to have the deed transferred by the end of the week. I sat in that dark kitchen staring at the screen, understanding finally that my brother had seen my accident as a business opportunity from day one. There were more emails. Tyler had researched the legal requirements for emergency deed transfers. He'd found the lawyer who specialized in crisis estate planning. He'd even looked up the symptoms of coma recovery to know what kind of confusion and memory problems he could expect me to have. He'd planned everything except for one detail. I'd been conscious enough to hear his conversations. I sat in the dark kitchen staring at the screen and finally understood that my brother had viewed my accident as a business opportunity from the very beginning. The emails continued. Tyler had researched the legal requirements for urgent deed transfers and located a lawyer specializing in crisis estate planning. He had even studied the symptoms of coma recovery so he would know what kind of confusion and memory issues to expect from me. He had planned everything, the exception of one crucial detail. I had been conscious enough to overhear his conversations. I closed the laptop and walked back to my room. Dad was snoring down the hall. Tyler was sleeping in. my old room like he owned the place, which legally he did. The next morning, I drove to town. My hands still shook a little, and I had to stop twice to rest. But I made it to the bank where Dad had done business for 30 years. Joseph Betty Anderson, the branch manager, looked shocked to see me. "We heard about your accident. How are you feeling?" "Getting better every day." "Betty, I need to ask you about something confidential, of course. Has anyone been asking about my dad's accounts recently or the farm's finances?" Betty's expression changed. "Well, your brother was here last month. He had power of attorney documents and said he needed to review everything for tax planning purposes." "What did he look at?" "Account balances, loan information, property, valuations. He seemed very thorough." "Did he take any documents?" "He made copies of everything, said he needed them for the lawyers." I thanked Betty and asked her to call me if Tyler came back for any reason. My next stop was the county recorder's office. The deed transfer was already filed. Tyler had moved fast, making everything official before I'd even woken up. But I also found something else. I closed the laptop and went back to my room. My dad was snoring in the hallway. Tyler was sleeping in my old room as if he already owned it, which, legally, he did. The next morning I drove into town. My hands were still shaking, and I had to pull over twice to rest. But I made it to the bank where my dad had been a customer for 30 years. The branch manager, Betty Anderson, was surprised to see me. "Joseph, we heard about your accident." "Feeling I'm getting better every day," I replied. "Betty, I need to ask you something in private, of course. Has anyone recently inquired about my dad's accounts or the farm's finances?" Betty's expression shifted. "Your brother was here last month. He had power of attorney documents and said he needed to review everything for tax planning." "What did he review?" I asked. "Account balances, loan information, and property valuations. He was very meticulous." "Did he take any documents?" "He made copies of everything and said he needed them for the lawyers." I thanked Betty and asked her to contact me if Tyler returned for any reason. My next stop was the county recorder's office, where the deed transfer had already been officially filed. Tyler had acted quickly, finalizing the transaction before I had even woken up. But I also discovered something else. Tyler had requested copies of all the property surveys, zoning maps, and development restriction documents. He wasn't just stealing the farm, he was preparing to destroy it. That afternoon, I called my cousin Danny in Oregon. Danny worked construction and knew people in land development. "Joseph, man, I heard about your accident. You okay?" "I'm alive." "Danny, I need a favor. Can you make some calls about land developers in the Boise area? I need to know if anyone's talking about a farm property near the city." "Sure, but why?" "I'll explain later. Just see what you can find out." Danny called back 2 hours later. "Your brother's been shopping your farm to 3 different companies. Word is, he's asking for preliminary bids." The conversation ended, and I sat in my truck outside the post office, understanding finally that I wasn't just fighting to get my farm back. I was fighting to save it from being turned into another subdivision. Tyler had requested copies of all property surveys, zoning maps, and documents related to development restrictions. He wasn't just stealing the farm, he was preparing to destroy it. That afternoon, I called my cousin Danny in Oregon, who works in construction and knows people in land development. "Joseph, I heard about your accident. Are you doing okay?" "Is alive, Danny? I need a favor. Can you make some calls to land developers in the Boise area? I need to know if anyone is discussing a farm property near the city." "Sure, but why?" "I'll explain later. Just see what you can find out." Danny called back 2 hours later. "Your brother has been marketing your farm to 3 different companies. The rumor is he's requesting initial bids." The call ended, and as I sat in my truck outside the post office, I finally understood that my fight wasn't just to reclaim the farm. It was to prevent it from becoming another subdivision. I had advantages Tyler didn't know about. First, I was thinking clearly while he believed I was still confused. Second, I knew every inch of that land, every legal boundary, every easement and restriction that came with the property. Third, I had relationships Tyler had never bothered to build. My plan started with old Pete Morrison. Pete, I need you to research something for me. Quietly. What's that, Joseph? I want to know if there are any restrictions on subdividing. Our farm, environmental protections, agricultural preservation, easements, anything that would prevent development. Pete smiled. Actually, there are. Your grandfather was pretty smart. When he bought the land in 1952, he signed agreements with the state agricultural department that protect it from development in exchange for tax benefits. Those agreements transfer with the deed. Are they still valid? As far as I know, let me check the current status. 2 days later, Pete called back. Joseph, those protections are still in place. Anyone who tries to subdivide that land for residential development would be in violation of state agricultural preservation laws. The penalties are severe. Does Tyler know about this? I doubt it. The agreements are buried in county records from 70 years ago. Most people wouldn't think to look. Don't tell him. Had several advantages that Tyler was unaware of. While he thought I was still confused, my mind was clear. Second, I knew every detail of the land, its legal boundaries, easements, and restrictions. Third, I had the relationships he had never bothered to build. My plan began with Pete Morrison. Pete, I need you to do some research for me discreetly. What is it, Joseph? I want to know if there are any restrictions on subdividing our farm, like environmental protections, agricultural preservation easements, or anything that would prevent development. Pete smiled. There actually are. Your grandfather was quite clever when he bought the land in. He signed agreements with the state agricultural department that protect it from development in exchange for tax benefits. Those agreements are transferred with the deed. Are they still valid? To my knowledge, yes. Let me check there. Current status? 2 days later, Pete called me back. Joseph, those protections are still active. Anyone who attempts to subdivide that land for residential development would be breaking state agricultural preservation laws, and the penalties are severe. Does Tyler know about this? I doubt it. The agreements are buried in county records. From 70 years ago, most people wouldn't think to look, and don't tell him. Next, I called Tom Bradley, who owned the farm adjacent to ours. Tom and I had been working together for 15 years, sharing equipment and coordinating irrigation. Tom, I need to ask you about something. If someone wanted to develop my family's farm, how would that affect your operation? Would destroy it. Drainage runs from your property to mine. If they put houses and roads on your land, it would change the water flow completely. Plus, I'd lose my main access road. Would you be willing to fight that kind of development? Hell yes. I'd sue anybody who tried it. Tom wasn't the only neighbor who would be affected. Spent the next week visiting every farm in our area, learning exactly how Tyler's development plans would impact everyone around us. Then I made the call I'd been avoiding. After that, I called Tom Bradley, who owns the farm next to ours. Tom and I had worked together for 15 years, sharing equipment and coordinating irrigation. Tom, I need to ask you something. If someone were to develop my family's farm, how would it affect your operation? It would ruin it. The drainage flows from your property to mine. If they built houses and roads on your land, the water flow would be completely disrupted. Plus, I would lose my primary access road. Would you be prepared to fight against that kind of development? Absolutely. I'd sue anyone who tried. Tom was not the only neighbor who would be affected. Spent the following week visiting every farm in our area, finding out precisely how Tyler's development plans would impact everyone. Then, I made the call I had been putting off. Tyler, we need to talk. Sure, Joseph. How are you feeling? Better. Good enough to start thinking about the farm's future. That's great. What's on your mind? I want to buy it back from you. There was a pause, Joseph. We talked about this. The legal fees alone. I know. 60,000. I think I can get a loan, really. Tyler sounded surprised. That's wonderful. When do you think you could have the money? Give me 2 weeks. I need to talk to the bank, get some paperwork together. Of course, take your time. But Tyler didn't wait. The next day, he drove to Boise for meetings with developers. I followed him. He met with representatives from Northview Development at a coffee shop downtown. I sat 3 tables away, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, listening to every word. We're looking at preliminary surveys next week, Tyler told them. My brothers agreed to the sale, so we should be able to move quickly. Tyler, we need to talk. Of course, Joseph. How are you feeling? Better. Well enough to start considering the farm's future. That's great. What do you have in mind? I want to buy it back from you? There was a pause. Joseph, we've already discussed this? The legal fees alone? I know. $60,000. I believe I can get a loan. Really? Tyler sounded shocked. That's fantastic. When do you think you'll have the money? Give me 2 weeks. I need to speak with the bank and get the paperwork ready. But Tyler didn't wait. The next day, he drove to Boise for meetings with developers, and I followed him. He met with representatives from Northview Development at a downtown coffee shop. I sat 3 tables away, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, and listened to every word. We'll be looking at preliminary surveys next week, Tyler told them. My brother has agreed to the sale, so we should be able to proceed quickly. About agricultural restrictions? The developer asked. None that would prevent residential development, Tyler lied. This is prime suburban land.
Oh.
They discussed preliminary offers, development timelines, and profit projections. Tyler was planning to sell for $2.8 million, almost double what the farm was worth as agricultural land. I drove home knowing exactly what I needed to do, the developer asked. What about agricultural restrictions? None that would hinder residential development, Tyler lied. This is premium suburban land. They then discussed initial offers, project timelines, and anticipated profits. Tyler planned to sell the farm for $2.8 million, nearly double its value as agricultural land. I drove home knowing exactly what I had to do. That evening, I called Danny again. Remember that favor I asked for? I need you to make one more call. Sure. Call Northview Development. Tell them you're a concerned citizen who heard about development plans for the old Morrison Farm outside Boise. Ask them if they're aware of the agricultural preservation easements on that property. What should I tell them if they ask how I? No. Tell them you work in land development and you've seen projects get shut down for violating those protections. Danny made the call the next morning. By afternoon, Northview had canceled their meeting with Tyler. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for Tyler to walk into it. That evening, I called Danny again. Remember the favor I asked for? I need you to make one more call. Okay. Call Northview Development. Tell them you're a concerned citizen who has heard about their plans to develop the old Morrison Farm near Boise. Ask if they are aware of the agricultural preservation easements on the property. What should I say if they ask how I know? Tell them you're in the land development business and have seen projects shut down for violating these types of protections. Danny made the call the following morning, and by that afternoon, Northview had canceled their meeting with Tyler. The trap was sprung. Now, all I had to do was wait for Tyler to fall into it. Tyler came home that Friday afternoon angry and confused. Northview had not only canceled their meeting, but also informed the other 2 developers about potential legal issues with the property. All 3 companies had withdrawn their preliminary offers. I don't understand what happened, Tyler told Dad over dinner. They were ready to move forward, and then suddenly they're all worried about some agricultural restrictions. I kept eating my soup, letting him talk. Someone must have tipped them off, Tyler continued. Maybe a neighbor who doesn't want development in the area. That's too bad, I said. But maybe it's for the best. I've been thinking about what you said about buying the farm back. Tyler looked up sharply. Do you have the money? Not exactly, but I talked to Tom Bradley and he's interested. In a partnership, he'd help with the financing if I can get the deed transferred back. Partnership. He wants to expand his operation, and our land connects perfectly with his. We'd share equipment, coordinate planting, maybe even process our crops together. I could see Tyler calculating. Tom Bradley was successful, well-respected, and had the financial resources to make a real offer. How much is he talking about? Tyler asked. He's willing to pay the $60,000 for your expenses, plus another $40,000 for your time. In trouble. $100,000 total just to transfer the deed back to me. Tyler returned home that Friday afternoon, angry and bewildered. Northview not only canceled their meeting, but also alerted the other two developers about potential legal problems with the property. All three companies have now withdrawn their initial offers. I don't understand what happened, Tyler complained to my dad during dinner. They were prepared to move forward, and then suddenly, they're all concerned about some agricultural restrictions. I quietly continued eating my soup and let him talk. Someone must have warned them, Tyler speculated. Perhaps a neighbor who opposes development in the area? It's unfortunate, I said, but perhaps it's for the best. I've been thinking about what you said about me buying the farm back. Tyler looked up abruptly. Do you have the money? Not exactly. But I spoke with Tom Bradley, and he's interested in a partnership. He would assist with the financing if I can get the deed transferred back. A partnership. He wants to expand his operation, and our land is a perfect match for his. We'd share equipment, coordinate our planting, and possibly even process our crops together. I could see Tyler doing the math. Tom Bradley was a respected, successful man with the financial means to make a legitimate offer. How much is he offering? Tyler asked. He's prepared to pay the $60,000 for your expenses, plus an additional $40,000 for your time and effort. A total of $100,000 just to transfer the deed back to me. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. $100,000 for a farm he'd stolen, with no development potential and no way to profit from his original plan? I'd need to think about it, he said finally. Of course, but Tom needs an answer by Monday. He has other opportunities if this doesn't work out. That night, Tyler made phone calls to Seattle. I heard him talking to Jessica about their plans, their timeline, their expenses. He'd taken vacation time, spent money on lawyers and consultations, and expected a huge payoff that was no longer possible. By Sunday morning, he'd decided, Joseph, I've thought about Tom's offer. $100,000 seems fair. Great. Tom's coming by tomorrow. Morning with the paperwork. Tyler fell silent for a long moment. $100,000 for a farm he had stolen. With no development potential and no way to profit from his initial plan, I'll have to think about it, he said at last. Naturally, but Tom needs a decision by Monday. He has other options if this doesn't work out. That night, Tyler made calls to Seattle. I overheard him discussing their plans, timeline, and expenses with Jessica. He had used up vacation time, paid for lawyers and consultations, and had anticipated a huge payout that was no longer possible. By Sunday morning, he had made his decision. Joseph, I've considered Tom's offer. $100,000 seems reasonable. Perfect. Tom will be here tomorrow morning with the paperwork. Tom wasn't coming alone. Monday morning at 9 a.m., Tom Bradley arrived with 3 other people. Pete Morrison, a representative from the state agricultural department, and a land use attorney I'd hired with money borrowed against my truck. Tyler looked confused when he saw the group walking up to the house. Joseph, I thought Tom was coming. Alone. Change of plans. We need to make sure everything's legal and proper. What followed was the most satisfying 30 minutes of my life. Pete Morrison presented the deed transfer documents that would return the farm to my name. The state agricultural representative explained the preservation easements that made development impossible. The land use attorney detailed the penalties Tyler would have faced if he'd actually sold to developers. You lied to 3 different companies about development restrictions, the attorney said. That could be considered fraudulent misrepresentation. But Tom didn't arrive by himself. At 9 a.m. on Monday, Tom Bradley showed up with 3 other people, Pete Morrison, a representative from the state agricultural department, and a land use attorney I had hired with money I borrowed against my truck. Tyler appeared confused. As he saw them approaching the house, Joseph, I thought Tom was coming alone. A change of plans. We need to ensure everything is legal and proper. The next 30 minutes were the most satisfying of my life. Pete Morrison presented the deed transfer papers that would put the farm back in my name. The state agricultural representative explained the preservation easements that made development impossible. The land use attorney then outlined the penalties Tyler would have faced if he had actually sold to developers. He misrepresented the development restrictions to 3 different companies, the attorney stated. That could be seen as fraudulent misrepresentation. Tyler's face went white. I didn't know about any restrictions. Ignorance isn't a defense when you're selling property. Pete said, the law requires disclosure of all encumbrances. Tom handed Tyler a check for exactly $60,000, the amount he'd claimed in legal expenses. Not the $100,000 he'd expected. Certainly not the $2.8 million he'd planned to steal. This covers your actual documented expenses, Tom said. Nothing more. Tyler looked at Dad, then at me, then at the documents spread across the kitchen table. He could sign the deed transfer and take his, $60,000, or he could refuse and face potential fraud charges for his dealings with the developers. He signed. Tyler's face turned pale. I was unaware of any restrictions. Ignorance is not a valid defense when you're selling property, Pete said. The law requires the disclosure of all encumbrances. Tom then handed Tyler a check for exactly $60,000, the amount he had claimed for legal expenses. Not the $100,000 he had anticipated, certainly not the $2.8 million he had intended to steal. This covers your actual documented expenses, Tom said. Nothing more. Tyler looked at my dad, then at me, then at the documents on the kitchen table. He had a choice. He could sign the deed transfer and accept the $60,000. Or he could refuse and face potential fraud charges for his dealings with the developers. He signed the documents after everyone left. Tyler packed his things without saying much. He'd planned to stay another week, but there wasn't any point now. I was trying to help, he said as he loaded his car. I know, I told him. But we both knew that wasn't true. Tyler drove back to Seattle that afternoon. Dad and I watched his car disappear down the long gravel driveway, past the fields that had almost been lost forever. 6 months later, Tyler lost his job in Seattle after his company discovered he'd used work time and resources for personal business deals. Jessica left him when she learned about the money he'd borrowed against their shared assets, expecting to pay it back with his farm profits. He eventually moved to a small apartment in Spokane, working as a sales representative for an office supply company. Dad started sleeping better once Tyler was gone. We never talked about what had happened during those terrible weeks. Some wounds heal better in silence. After everyone left, Tyler quietly packed his belongings. He had planned to stay for another week, but there was no reason to now. I was just trying to help, he said as he put his things in the car. I know, I replied, though we both knew it wasn't true. Tyler drove back to Seattle that afternoon. My dad and I stood and watched his car disappear down the long gravel driveway, past the fields that had almost been lost forever. 6 months later, Tyler was fired from his job in Seattle after his company discovered he had used company time and resources for personal business. Jessica left him when she found out he had borrowed against their shared assets, expecting to repay the loans with the farm profits. He eventually moved to a small apartment in Spokane and started working as a sales representative for an office supply company. My dad began to sleep better after Tyler left, and we never discussed what had happened during those terrible weeks. Some wounds heal best when left unspoken. I learned that you can't trust people just because they share your blood, but you can trust land to be what it's always been: honest, demanding, and worth fighting for. I learned that blood relations don't automatically guarantee trustworthiness. However, you can always rely on the land to be what it has always been: honest, demanding, and worth fighting for.